Hello, my name is Samuel George London, and welcome to Comics for the Apocalypse. On today's episode, I speak to comic book writer, podcaster, and the infinitely knowledgeable Tony Esmond about what comics he would take into the apocalypse. But before we get into it, I've got a few bits of news. First, some of you may have seen on Twitter and the like that last Wednesday I launched my most recent Kickstarter, Beyond Milford Green. This is the follow-up to my first Kickstarter, Milford Green, and immediately follows on from that story. If you like the idea of Star Trek with a Victorian twist, be sure to check out it on Kickstarter by following www.signalcomics.com/beyond. Secondly, I've set up a community on Reddit for Comics for the Apocalypse, where you can see all of the guest answers and discuss them with fellow listeners. However, there are 3 rules. Be nice, keep it civil, and no spamming. Get involved with that at reddit.com/r/comics apocalypse. Lastly, we've had 1 5-star review on iTunes so far, which is wonderful, so thank you very much, Michael2402. However, it would be nice to have a few more, so if you do enjoy the show, please leave a review on iTunes or whichever podcast service you use, as not only will it let me know that you liked it, but I believe that it helps other people be aware of the show as well. Now, without further ado, on with the show. Hello, Tony.
Hello, mate. I love this bit. We do this on the Awesome Pod where we pretend we haven't been talking for half an hour already.
Yeah, that's it.
It's good.
It's good. Yeah. It's completely natural, organic, and completely professional. As we were kind of saying before that, how has your retirement been, Tony?
It's been since it only started a couple of days ago. It's actually been all right. I'm a little bit bored. I'll be honest with you. Yeah, so this comes as a welcome distraction, but totally. And it made me dig through a load of long boxes to get some comics to talk about today. So yeah, it's good.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'll be back on tomorrow. We'll do it every day. It's fine.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we can make it a daily occurrence.
It'll be
or maybe we could do a side podcast.
Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people are clearly already sick of me from the other podcasts I do, but that'll be fine. Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on you.
As I was telling Dan a couple of weeks ago, that you guys are basically my Monday morning every week.
Oh dear, sorry about that.
Yeah, so I get to listen to your wondrous tones even more, Tony.
We're actually at the point now where we kind of forget that anyone's sort of listening when we do it, and I kind of like that.
That's good.
I kind of like that
it's a natural conversation.
Yeah, they do make me laugh, those pair of excuse the French, but yeah, they do. Right. Yeah, it's good fun, and I think we're at that point where you just forget that you're recording, sort of thing like that. Well, Vince occasionally actually forgets to record, but I can't bring that up anymore because he'll.
I do remember that one time. I think it was mid last year maybe or something, wasn't it?
When we've done almost 190 episodes and it only happened once, it ain't too bad.
It's not bad stats. So, yeah, that's all right. And for anybody that doesn't know who you are, Tony Esmond, what do you do in the world of comics?
I'm obviously on the Awesome Comics podcast. I've written a sort of for various different sites. I've written a sort of reviews and commentary and stuff like that for, I suppose, probably about 15 years now, maybe slightly less. And I've been doing my own small press comics since the mid 90s. Under a sort of various guises. This year, I suppose I'll have had a few things out by the time this gets posted. So the Awesome Comics issue 4 just came out. True Believers last weekend. Yes. We're very pleased with that. So we managed to do 4 issues in a year, which we're sort of super chuffed about. I've written the intro for Gallant and Amos, which is hopefully will have passed its Kickstarter amount by about now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
How to make comics with Springworth. That's just come out as well, which I'm absolutely over the moon with as well.
It's great, mate. I've got my copy.
You. Oh, nice one.
Yeah. Because my daughter's only 18 months old, so I'm going to have to wait a couple of years before she can actually kind of go at it, or we can go at it together.
Nice one.
I'm looking forward to that day.
Oh, brilliant! That's really kind of you, mate. Thank you for that. And so that's kind of the Hanks is a beast. His art's great in that, and he's sort of really good stuff. And as is Prolix in Cockney Kung Fu as well, it's just been a a really fun ride doing that with Vince and Dan, that the Awesome Comics Anthology, and Nick. And we got a couple of Andy Blaw did us a cover, and an old mate of mine, Ed Triquino's storyboard artist on Black Panther and Avengers and stuff, did us one cover as well. So it's been a really sort of exciting thing to do for ourselves, really.
Totally.
Yeah,
it's been great. And where can people get that, Tony?
If you go to awesomecomics.big, oh, you've dropped me right in it there, and I can't remember it now. Let me look it up. While I'm talking to you. This is a bit that I usually get down with, but here it is. It's awesomecomicpod.bigcartel.com, and they're only £1 for a digital copy and £3 for each physical copy. But if you catch us at conventions, we've usually got a sort of bundle sale to do and stuff like that. But Springworth is available from the Little Heroes website, or it's actually, I think you can get it on Amazon, and you can get it on the Waterstones website as well. So they're sort of where you can get that stuff from. But that's the hard sell. I often tell people at conventions I don't do hard sell. I work freelance for No Brow as well, and people come over and I actually make a point saying, look, I'm not one of those blokes who like shoves a comic in your hands and makes you hold it and buy it, and it's that sort of thing. I think their comics, and hopefully our comics as well as yours, just speak for themselves. You know what I mean? That's all you need.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah,
definitely. And so, social media wise, where can people follow you?
So EZOHYZ is the thing on Twitter. Why I made that stupid name up, I don't know. It can only be a bit better than Jester Diablo.
Yeah, exactly.
Or if you go to neverhidanything.blogspot.co.uk, it's where I usually just crazily rant at things. I put a mission statement up. I don't know if you get the mailer I do in Prolix.
Yeah, I do.
Right. Yeah, we kicked off a bit this week. So I've kind of put a new policy of like total honesty now, where I used to avoid reviewing books if I didn't like them, or I'd say that the staples look nice or something, So we'll see where that goes. It's to a certain element, it's satirical, and it is meant to be satirical, and all satire should be angry, in my opinion. But we do a bit of that. So if you go to tinyletter.com/Cockney Kung Fu, we do like a mailer. It's going to go to a monthly one as of now, really, because it was really done for Cockney Kung Fu. But me and Nick have got plans beyond. Listen to me rattling on, right? That's enough. Done.
I love it, mate. Yeah, but you've got major plans for the future. So
yeah, we have. Yeah, we got a little bit of a twist coming. Great. Sarah Harris has done us a little side story, and I'm doing something in the same universe, although not quite connected at the moment, with Cliff Cumber, who's drawing something for me at the moment, which is looking amazing. So sort of quite pleased. Yeah, so we'll see where that goes. Just a bit of fun, isn't it? That's the thing in the small press. It's a bit of fun, isn't it? That's what you've got to do.
That's what it's all about. Just a little bit of fun, and it's. I like to think of it as a hobby that kind of pays for itself, basically.
Exactly.
As well. Yeah. I want kind of my comics career to be a hobby that pays for itself.
Yeah, I tried prostitution. It didn't really pay for itself, so
it didn't work out. Fiscally, it wasn't working. Yeah, so I moved into the comics.
I thought small press.
It's a natural shift. And speaking of comics, thank you so much for being on Comics for the Apocalypse.
No, pleasure, man. I really had real fun actually writing this list out. It reminded me a bit of Desert Island Discs, where you got to like really sort of tie it down. I know you've got different subjects, but I really a couple of them stumped me, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think I found my way in the end. Yeah,
great. And I mean, it is essentially Desert Island Discs for comics.
Kind of, isn't it?
And that's really the idea. I mean, I love Desert Island Discs, and it gives you a real insight into just people, basically, and people that you love, whether it be comedians, actors, scientists, or whoever. And this specifically, it's comic creators. So
as a little sidebar, I became sort of slightly obsessed with Desert Island Discs, because I think they dumped like 8,000 episodes or something on iTunes, didn't they?
Yeah.
So you can go back all the way to the 60s and stuff and listen to people, you name it, they've been on it really, and people long dead are on it. And we did a couple of years ago now, we did a Desert Island comics thing on the podcast, and it was Al Ewing came on, who writes the Avengers and Uncanny X-Men at the moment and stuff like that. And it all sort of degenerated, as it does with us. And I was running a brothel made of coconut women. And which Nick Brokenshaw drew us a picture and sent in, which is like genius. And it all just sort of went a bit off.
You have to send me that.
yeah. And it just went off on one. And it's like, oh God, what have we done? You know what I mean? We've got this Marvel artist on, and we're just like talking about coconut boobs, But there you go. He seemed to go with it.
It happens,
Yeah.
What a better place than the Awesome Comics
Exactly.
podcast,
Exactly. Uncut.
Fantastic, brilliant.
It's a really great format, man. I listened to Milmos the other day, and I really like it. And I know we've had a little chat beforehand, but I might have a few sort of surprises along the way. So we'll see.
I hope so.
See what we think.
That's what it's all about. Speaking of which, first question that everybody's asked on Comics for the Apocalypse.
Yeah.
What type of apocalypse would you like to be in, or what type of apocalypse do you think you'd survive in?
Yeah, this is a strange one, isn't it? You could always choose the one where there's no more bananas or something like that, and the ketchup runs out. But I decided to go for. There's an old 70s TV series. I don't know if you've seen it. I think you're a bit younger than me, Sam. But called The Survivors. Have you ever heard of it?
Survivors. I have heard of The Survivors, but I don't really know the ins and outs of it.
I recommend it to anyone who's into The Walking Dead. It's basically The Walking Dead without zombies. Oh. So I think it's something like 90% of the world die of a disease, and the rest have to sort of fight to survive. But as with all sort of good zombie fiction, it's not the zombies that are the problem, it's the other humans, and that's what they come across. So I kind of like that, where everyone leaves me alone, and I might learn to play the harmonica or something and read a load of comics.
Brilliant.
And with less sort of rabies and TB and stuff like that, because they're always dying of rabies and TB in that series. But it's a bit like Day of the Triffids without any plants.
Right.
So London becomes a bit feudal, and rats everywhere, and so they all escape to the country and they try and start farms, and it's not the easiest thing in the world to do that. And because there's no there's no computers back then, but there's no computers now, they actually have to find books to learn how to farm, or make blankets, or all the things that you and I can't do. We couldn't do.
Exactly. There aren't YouTube videos where you can learn how to use a combine harvester or something.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a few faces in it. You're right, Carolyn Seymour, if you know her. She was in a couple of Star Treks, and she's a recognisable face. There's a few people in it. Everyone's sort of they're either like proper rough Cockney or carrot accents, or they're proper BBC enunciation. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it ran for 4 years. There's 4 series of it. It's pretty bleak. Everyone remembers the rabies episode, but I'd kind of like that, where I could just go and live on a farm somewhere, and like maybe with a couple of rifles, and just take pot shots at anyone who came near the land, and just read a lot of X-Men. Nice. That's kind of I think by about if it happened now, by about 2052, I'd have read all the unread comics I own.
Oh yeah, you've got a long list.
Yeah. I've got a couple of long boxes here in front of me. Yeah, so that's kind of where I go with it. I don't know what anyone. I've only heard really Milmo's one, but I don't know what anyone else has said. But it's kind of zombies aren't that fun, are they?
No, well, I think they're fun for kind of an afternoon in like one of those real world games that you can play. You can do these zombie experiences now, can't you?
Yeah.
Maybe it'd be fun for an afternoon, but kind of for life, maybe not.
It's like an afternoon in Croydon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, just get the DLR out of there.
I went to Croydon recently and sat in a Starbucks, and a woman sat next to me who was clearly a bit strange, and she had a balloon tied to her head. Really? She was ever so friendly. I sort of chatted to her, but she had I thought you got a balloon tied to your head. She just said, "Yeah." Well, that's cool.
Fair enough. That's Croydon for you, isn't
it? Yeah.
Straight up. And funnily enough, kind of your apocalypse is fairly similar to Dan's.
Oh right, okay.
Because at this point, Dan's episode hasn't aired yet, but it would have. When this episode airs, he actually went for The Stand by Stephen King.
Oh, okay. He likes that, doesn't he? He likes that book. Yeah.
So that's fairly similar to kind of what you're saying.
Okay.
In terms of kind of there's a virus that wipes out like 90% of the population, basically. But it's humans are the problem.
Exactly.
But in your escape from London to your farm out in the country, you had to grab a load of comics. And specific comics in your mind. So you firstly grab the comic that you first remember enjoying, and what is that comic?
Yeah, this is a tough one because I'm obviously very old, and I really can't remember the first thing I read. The thing I probably remember the most is a comic called Mighty World of Marvel, which was actually started out as colour and then became black and white. I didn't start reading it till it was black and white, but it was reprints of American Silver Age, late Silver Age, early Bronze Age comics in black and white from Marvel. So we had Spider-Man and the Hulk and the Fantastic Four. Some of them ran like Conan, the Avengers, Master of Kung Fu, Doc Savage, Silver Surfer, and all this sort of thing. So I was always sort of pleased because I'm slightly too young to have remembered the initial sort of burst of comics from Marvel. I did experience them firsthand by reading them in the British black and white reprints, if that makes sense. So
yeah, totally.
And we'll talk about this in a bit, but some of these images are literally sort of burnt into my retina, where I read them over and over again. And these would come out weekly. So Mighty World of Marvel, I think when I started reading it, had the Hulk. I can't remember what the backups were. Maybe Fantastic Four and something else. But there was only 4 or 5 pages. And they all had letters pages and, usual sort of English comics mazes and toys you could buy and all this sort of thing in them. But it was all the classics. It was John Romita Sr. on Spider-Man, and it was Kirby and Ditko and all these sort of Buscema especially. I remember a lot of Buscema from back then. And I sort of experienced them. And Marvel UK would sort of jump about and reprint them. And I think it's David Michelini, who was a Marvel and a DC writer. He, as a young lad sort of editor, he said, I was in charge of the Marvel. It wasn't called Marvel UK at the time. It was just sort of the UK end of Marvel. He said, I was in charge of Marvel in the UK and the translations, or not the translations, the reprints. And he said, the only thing I had to do was translate the word, put the letter U into things like colour and stuff like that. He said that was my job.
Yeah. Just put U and S's in like organisation and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like yeah. And if you read some of them, they're interesting because obviously when they were running 4 or 5 pages, maybe up to 6 pages a week, they obviously didn't have the initial intro splash page, so they actually had some new pages drawn for them. And
so there's some unique art there.
There is, and some unique covers as well. I'm a big Master of Kung Fu collector, so I collect like foreign editions and stuff like that. And so I've collected all the Marvel UK weeklies of that because they ran different covers and different intro pages and stuff like that. So somebody would be sort of ghosting Gulacy's style or Jim Starlin style and stuff like that. And it's quite interesting to see sometimes. So I would probably say that would be what it is. They were magazine size, so I used to roll them up and stick them in the back of my pocket and get out my bike as a kid. It's that sort of thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So there you go.
And any particular kind of stories that kind of jump out at you?
Yeah, I think I really, really took to the Herb Trimpe, Len Wein, Hulk stories, and things like Sasquatch, and the first Wolverine story, which was written by Len Wein, which is, I think he appears in the last issue in the American series, issue 180, and then from there onwards. And it was basically sort of, the Hulk was kind of, I think kind of the Hulk's like almost an entry drug for kids, I think sometimes, because he's this sort of fairly simplistic story. I know they've overcomplicated it perhaps recently, but he sort of jumps around the country bashing up the Abomination, or, the next month, you'll fight Valkyrie in one, and then they'll jump to another bit of America and he'll fight someone, Thunderbolt Ross will attack him with some machine he's built or something like that, And it was kind of just this cool thing. It had there was a little bit of social context to it about, the homeless people of the world and, the downtrodden and stuff like that. And occasionally, it probably had a big effect on me. Len Wein was sort of a very sort of socially aware guy, and really interesting. I know Herb Trimpe's art's always stayed with me because I've always really enjoyed his art. I think probably them, if I had to say. Yeah, I've bought the American version since and bought the black and white essential and all that sort of stuff, because we're all freaks, aren't we?
Yeah. You're collecting collector freaks.
We are, aren't we? Yeah, exactly.
Up, so much stuff accumulating now. It's just, it gets more and more out of hand.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah,
it really does.
Yeah. I'm a bit worried about my house sinking.
Yes, yeah.
I'm a little bit worried about that
collapsing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. As you are rummaging through your long boxes, you're looking for the funniest or the comic that made you laugh out loud the most before kind of scarpering off to your farm. And which comic is that?
Yeah, this is a difficult one, isn't it? I don't know. Have you done this one yourself yet, Sam? Have you written your own
No,
list yet?
I haven't. I haven't written my own list yet.
Yeah.
I might do one day.
Yeah, we need to do that one, don't you? You need
It's.
to.
I should do it as a special at some point.
Yeah. Because I don't even was it Roy?
Episode 100?
We were talking about Desert on this. Roy Plumley, I think he did 2, didn't he? I think he got his friends in who to do an interview. I think Eamon Holmes come on and interviewed him. So I think it's worth doing, worth thinking about. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I'll certainly think about that.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I found it difficult to think of a comic that actually made me laugh out loud. I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? And then I remembered a comic that he's a character who sort of jumps about and you don't really see enough. His real name, apparently, it depends on which comic you read, because it's very sort of scatological and irreverent. But his real name is Erwin Schwab, and he's the Ambush Bug. I don't know whether people know about this character because he's not.
Yeah, I hadn't come across it until you sent it. So I was really interested to read about him.
Nice one.
His origin and things. So yeah, tell us more.
So I was sending you some panels earlier as well, actually, on the DMs, which were making me chuckle.
Brilliant. They're very Tom Jones.
Yeah, him and Darkseid went karaokeing. Yeah.
It's
but he's
usual to be killed by someone or something like that.
Is that what it was?
It's something like that.
He's class.
Everybody's like legged it out of the bar because they're like, this isn't going well.
Yeah, Darkseid is if this doesn't go well, am I meant to applaud? Yeah, it's like that, isn't it? Yeah. And he's a character who's created by one of my favourite creators, who's a guy called Keith Giffen, who I think I first came across Keith Giffen when he was doing The Defenders, and I thought, this is a strange style. It's like he started off almost a bit like a Kirby kind of style to him, in the same way that Barry Windsor Smith, when he was just Barry Smith, started out as a sort of little bit of a Kirby clone. And he then moved on to, I'm going to say, the next time I saw him was Legion of Superheroes. He did the Great Darkness saga. And then he did DC Comics Presents issue 52 in 1982, which was Ambush Bug. And he's Ambush Bug. Everyone thinks that Deadpool leads the way in sort of irreverent, winking at the camera, saying ridiculous stuff, breaking the fourth wall kind of stuff. But it's not. Ambush Bug was like a decade before he did that, He's I kind of see him a little bit as an antidote to the grimness that was in DC Comics in the sort of mid 80s, when you had Legends of the Dark Knight and Watchmen and stuff like that, because he's totally irreverent to everything he does. He's at the same time totally aware of the madness of his surroundings and his own sort of madness, but he is also like totally nuts. There's no telling what he's going to do there, and he is kind of just there to cause trouble. I suppose he's kind of the court jester of the DC universe, sort of jumping about. He does the whole sort of breaking the fourth wall, crossing over into the real world, and he sometimes carries around a doll that he believes is a real person, or pretends to believe is a real person, and is his sidekick, and calls him Cheeks, the toy wonder, which doesn't actually do anything, sort of thing. And I kind of think we need a little bit of the Ambush Bug occasionally in comics, because it sort of takes the, everyone's so serious all the time, aren't they?
Doesn't it?
Yeah. And I think there's a few people at DC when the Image Revolution started and everyone was saying stuff through gritted teeth, must have thought, thank fuck we've got the Ambush Bug just to take the piss out of all this sort of thing.
Yes. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, he could have been. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he could almost have been. I was going to choose something by Dave Sim to talk to you about, and I didn't in the end. But he's almost a character in Cerebus. I'm going to say there's almost that crossover element to him, like a Lord Julius kind of character or something like that. But he looks like a weird. It's hard to tell. It looks like probably a costume. Keith Giffen's style sort of lends itself to sort of strange. It certainly his more recent style. There's no sort of defined superhero costume going on. It looks like a bit like a sort of saggy costume that he wears, and he looks a bit like maybe Bug from, if anyone knows Bug from Guardians of the Galaxy and before that, Micronauts. There's a little bit of the touch of that. He's got the sort of antennae sticking up, and he just sort of finds himself in bizarre circumstances. He gets hit on by an older Lois Lane in a comic I read today. I was trying to I thought,
Oh, really?
yeah, who sort of lifts her leg and said, "I used to be a woman," and you're thinking, right, where's this going? I'm not actually sure. And then it sort of, what are we saying here? And then it sort of skips over to something else where he meets a turtle who's drawing pictures of him, and they're just it's like the Young Ones or something like that. It appeals to my sort of sense of sort of ridiculous humour, I suppose, of that sort of thing.
Anarchy.
Yes, total anarchy. Yeah, yes. He's the Spike Milligan, I suppose, put it that way, of
There you
the
go.
superhero world. Yeah, and I'd like to see him. I think the only thing you can find on Comixology, I looked it up earlier, is Ambush Bug Year None, which made me laugh. From 2006 is, I think, the only thing that's on Comixology, but it's worth reading. It's still pretty good. Yeah, it's still all right.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you take Ambush Bug Year None.
Yeah, that's the one I take. I take that miniseries. I think it's 6 issues, so I take that.
Oh,
yeah,
nice. There you go. That's a decent amount.
It gets a bit spicy in that one because he gets married
really?
and he's a bit afraid about doing the thing when you get married. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, but
because like his whole thing is that he's basically mentally unwell.
Yeah,
he has mental health issues, basically.
Yeah,
from what I gathered.
And I know people will be going, that's outrageous, laughing at someone with mental health issues. But some people, I'm going to say it, some people with mental health issues can be quite funny.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And actually, it's kind of, I mean, I don't know when Ambush Bug actually started, but that's kind of actually quite good foresight. Like, if it started in the 80s, I think maybe you said.
Yeah, it was, 82.
So, kind of raising, mental health issues at that time, it's...
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There was no
progressive.
Yeah, these people who write this stuff. I met Keith Giffen at New York year before last, and I've always been a huge fan of his. I didn't know he was there, and he was on the Heroes Initiative table, and he's got quite a reputation, Keith Giffen, of being a little bit grumpy and not really being that chatty to fans and podcasters and stuff like that. And I said, I'm a big fan. Like, sign this, will you? And he was an absolute joy. I had a picture with him and all this sort of thing. And and he was all right, but certainly he would be someone who would be very much aware of that sort of thing, I'm sure. Yeah, he's a bit of a sort of he's got a touch of a sort of grumpy old hippie about him, you know what I mean? So sort of he'd be doing it for the right reason, I'm sure. Yeah, there you go.
Excellent. So when you do grab your copy of Ambush Bug Year None, you then look for the saddest or most upsetting comic, just so that kind of you can reflect on these things. And what comic would you grab?
Yeah, this is another one I had trouble with. I don't know if you sort of thought what you would do for this, Sam, but it's a real difficult one. The saddest
I've got
comic.
one.
Have you? Yeah. We'll save that.
I'll keep that close to my chest, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to try and be like a funny bastard and say Aquaman the movie because it's so sad that so many people went and saw it and enjoyed it because it's a load of old toot. But I didn't go with that in the end. So I went with an issue of Scalped.
Right.
This is written by Jason Aaron, art by Danijel Zazelj is the art I'm reading that, and Guilia Brusca on colours, both sort of very relevant to this issue. Now, I remember, as a sort of intro to this, I remember as a kid and as a teenager, my dad was a big reader of the history of Indigenous people of North America and America and Canada. And I remember he lent me a book to read, which is a book called Bury My Heart, A Wounded Knee by D. Brown, which I don't know if any of you've heard of it or any of the listeners. This is the most heartbreaking book you'll possibly read about the history of the American West. Wow. From the sort of 19th century on, and how the Indigenous people were sort of just treated so utterly terribly. You know what I mean?
It's really bad.
Yeah, it is terrible. But and so anything, and it is a tragic subject, and I'm drawn to tragic characters, tragic stories. I don't know why. It's something that is an interesting way to write something, I think, sometimes. And we need a bit of the tragic in our lives sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
So I was drawn to Scout when Jason Aaron, I heard him on an interview talking about it, I think with John Suntris. I'm a big fan of the Word Balloon podcast and friends with John now. And Jason Aaron is probably one of my favourite writers to come out of indie into the mainstream for, just the last 20 years. And it's a book that... have you read it, dude? Have you? Or?
I have not, no. I'm eager to read that.
Yeah, I'd really recommend it. I would really recommend it. And I think, I hate to say this, it's become a TV series, but isn't everything? Do you know what I mean? So
it gets to that, so fairly easy.
yeah, and what it does is it kind of it's a crime noir book, really, and explores the exploitation of the reservations. And I don't know if you know this, but the reservations aren't managed in America by the local police. They're managed federally because they're so like, I mean, technically they're so like the Wild West, and they're so dangerous that the local police can't handle it. So the FBI actually have officers stationed at the reservations, and I think mostly because they have casinos and stuff at them, and it explores the sort of world, the dirty sort of corrupt world of the casino, the methamphetamine and heroin that's sold on these reservations, the violence, the sexual violence, and just this sort of totally brutal lifestyle. And it's a really gritty book that is just so well told on all different levels. And if you read the first issue, you'll find the spoiler out at the end of the first issue is that the main character is an undercover cop who goes into this reservation, and things don't go well for him. But it's really it's really interesting. But what happens is by issue 35, you have been put through the ringer in this book. It is like non-stop bleak. You're like, Christ, what is going on? And what Jason Aaron does, because he's that clever bastard, do you know what I mean? He presses pause on the maiden story, and he puts a single issue story in about an elderly couple who live on they live on the outskirts of one of the reservations, and they're this old couple who live together. They live alone, and they're really poor, and they live under the flight path of the local Air Force base. In fact, they sort of joke with each other as a plane flies over. The little in-joke is they'll go, "That's an F-35," and his wife will go, "No, I think that's an F-16." And it's just like they're the most touching couple, you know. But they're struggling so much financially, and the winter's really set in, and the snow's there, and this sort of thing. And the husband eventually, they're laying under the blankets, freezing cold at night, and then he says, "I think I'll go into town tomorrow." And the wife knows that is him saying he's going to go to the local food bank. And he's finally sort of got the courage, well, not got the courage, but, you know, sucked up his dignity a bit and has decided to go and do that. And something happens, and it's a real sort of plays with your emotions kind of book. And I read it again today, and I teared up reading it again today. It is literally the saddest book. There's a revelation at some point in it, which I won't ruin you, because I recommend you read this. It's so
sounds
lovely.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I looked at the artwork and everything beforehand, and I mean, it looks amazing, and kind of the style of art certainly leans into the poverty that they seem to kind of be in, and the emotion that's kind of wrapped up in that.
I mean, it's a change of artist, because the normal artist on the series was R.M. Guerra, whose style isn't that far distant, but is more caricature, more 100 Bullets style art.
Right.
But the start of it is it borders on angular. There's moments that are like very nearly abstract, you know. And he plays about with. There's very little happens. I mean, there's whole tranches that are just their faces talking to each other and stuff like that. But there's a moment you think it can't possibly get any worse, and then something happens and you think, oh dear, you know. And it's
and it does.
yeah.
I hate those stories. You're like, oh, I can't. It does.
Yeah. And Guilia Brusco's colours, he uses like a one-wash colour on some pages, so you get a tone shift on maybe a red across the whole page.
Right. Wow.
That's kind of the lights from the planes playing on them in the hat. It's really well done. If you get the collections, I don't know about the hardbacks because I haven't got them, but I've got I bought the trades as well. So if you go to Trade 7, it actually starts. It's the first issue in Trade 7 if you wanted to get it. If you find that cheaper than finding a single issue. But it is on Comixology. You can buy it on there, so it is available on there. And I would think you'd probably find a Comic Mart or a local sort of back issue. You'd probably find this issue quite easily. But as a whole, I would highly recommend Scout. It is just an amazing series. It's one of those, I know people harp on about it, but where the Vertigo do really well. They do a series, but it is limited to 60 or 70 issues or something. I think this was 60. Right. and it's got a beginning and an end, a bit like sort of Preacher did and Sandman did and stuff like that. It's a beautiful series, and you can see why Aaron is such. Having met him, I think it was at Thought Bubble a couple of years ago, and he's such a sweet guy as well. He's a bit of a sort of gentle giant character. If you can find anything by him, I have to say it's all good stuff.
Well worth it.
Fantastic.
There you go. And then changing gears from kind of saddest, we go to scariest or most horrifying comic. Which one do you grab out of your long box?
Yeah, this is the one. I was going to go for the obvious and go for something like Swamp Thing, or something like that. And I thought, these have been talked about a lot, and I think everyone knows about Alan Moore's Swamp Thing or Len Wein's Swamp Thing, and everyone knows about, I don't know, Sandman or or that sort of thing, or Tomb of Dracula or something. But so I thought I'd choose something that is scary for another reason. So I went with Chernobyl, The Zone, which is a book out of Centrala. It's written by Francisco Sanchez, art by Natasha Bustos. I'm sort of friendly with Centrala, and they make some interesting stuff. They really do push the limits of what is a comic and what's not, and what is crazy and what's not, and all this sort of thing. And I like they're out there taking chances. And this is the one book of theirs that I would happily recommend to nearly everyone who says, what can I read? What's interesting and stuff like that. It's 188 pages, black and white. And for those of us to remember, the 26th of April 1986 is when Chernobyl happened and it went active. Yeah. And this book is about that place, and about the families from around there, and about some people who return to it, and they see the inhumanity of humanity type stuff, and you just see what a human can do to another one, and it's got a sort of sinister beauty to it when they return. And there's the cover image is of a Ferris wheel, with all the plants have overgrown it, and this 30 years. This was written on the 30-year anniversary, and there's a really interesting introduction which gives you some history to it, which is a really interesting part. And there's the introduction is probably the most touching bit, or the prologue, about a family, and they discover the horses is the foal that is born is mutated, and they're not really going to live there, and they're beginning to feel ill and stuff like that. And then a group of modern friends move in there, so it's not full of monsters and it's not full of zombies, but it's definitely like this place that for thousands of years from now on it won't be habitable, and it's because we did something
radioactive.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because we did this sort of stupid, ridiculous thing. And there's some great sort of landscapes and vistas and stuff like that that Natasha draws in it. And there's also a lot of emotion through the faces. She plays really well with wordless pages about them traveling through the zone, as it were. And looking at the block of flats and trying to make their way into it. And there's a great scene where the male character towards the end, they climb up the stairs, they take their chances and climb up the stairs of this sort of old block of flats, old sort of Soviet block of flats, and they find like a drawing that someone's done of the nuclear power factory and stuff like that, and he thinks back about how that happened and stuff. And it's really touching. It's still available. I checked today. It's still available through their website, and I think they do a lot of the small press shows. I know they do LCAF every year. And they do Safari and stuff like that. And it's worth catching up with Centrala. They're unorthodox, put it that way.
Well, that's always good to kind of. Yeah, it's even good to push your own limits of what you think you like, because it's easy to kind of end up just kind of going for one particular type of comic. But you really do need to just try and push your own limits. That's a great recommend.
And it's a long read. It's a dense read, but it'll educate you as well. Yeah. I'm never really frightened by comics. I mean, often a little bit disturbed. Those of us who've read stuff like Crossed or something like that. Right. I don't really need to read about people being beaten to death with a horse stick or something. But it's a little bit disturbing. I almost did a book called Scars by Warren Ellis and Jason Burrows, which is about a child murder. I thought that's too bleak, so I chose something about loads of people dying in a nuclear explosion.
Nuclear explosion is
that's
fine.
Yeah.
But,
highly recommended. I think people would dig it. I did a review for Down the Tubes a couple of years ago, and I think it got sort of reposted in a couple of Polish newspapers and translated and stuff like that, which is quite pleased of. It's only a book that evokes emotion, when you read it. It really does.
Very much so. Yeah, because obviously it's based on a real event, so I mean, there's real stakes with that.
Exactly.
Kind of trying to show respect to everybody that went through it and is still going through it and is still affected by it. So
yeah, exactly.
that's,
Yeah,
cool.
definitely.
And
Cool.
then kind of talking of deep questions, the next comic that you think that you need to grab out your long box is the most meaningful comic to you, which is...
Yeah, you're putting me through it around this. I don't people behind the curtain, but we only talked about me coming on yesterday, and you sort of sent me these things.
You really smashed it, mate. I mean, I pushed really turned it around.
Because you said, when can you do? And I'm a bit home alone this week, so I said, I can do this week. What about tomorrow? And you went, okay. I thought, no, I've got to do all this writing. But yeah, it's easy when you're just reading good comics, aren't you? But I tried to think about what has held meaning for me and what I've thought about over the years. And I'm going to start this by saying I dare you to find a better character in comics than Ben Grimm, the Thing. I've always thought he's a sort of incredibly strong, sort of slightly tragic, heroic, but heroic.
Very tragic. Yeah.
Funny, but he's also sad, a sort of lovable as well character. He's that one character you can always depend on, and he's also a good guy. He's a good bloke. He's never sort of let me down. So I went for Fantastic 451, which is This Man, This Monster,
the classic.
Which it's an amazing comic. It really is. Just from page one. I mean, page one is that iconic image of him standing in the rain, and it just speaks so much just to that single image, to his character. I mean, I don't know what you think, but I've always thought of I don't know, I've kind of translated it in my own head. I've always thought of, I know they did a what if like this, but I've always thought that Kirby was the Thing and Stanley was Mr. Fantastic Reed. That's where I've it's probably like the closest analogy that we can find in probably of reality. And he's this sort of brawler and honest guy, and he stands by his friends. And to sort of spell the story out, it starts with him. He's obviously feeling a bit down, and they've just come through, being put through the ringer. So you've had the Inhuman saga, you've had Galactus and the Silver Surfer, and I think, off the top of my head, I think the annual came in where Reed married Sue. So he's kind of feeling maybe a bit on the outside at this point, and this is where Kirby and Stan, everyone puts Stan down, but this is where I think they're a genius, is he's in the rain and he's standing there and you think, what is he doing? Is he staring at something? Is he watching someone? Is he just depressed, or whatever is going on with him? And a cop car pulls up, and in any other kind of right-on fiction in the 70s, or even now, the cops would probably get out and hassle him, wouldn't they? He'd probably get searched, or something like that would happen, or they'd beat him up or plant evidence on him, or something that is a sort of lazy go-to for a story these days. But what they do is they say to him, "You're right," and he says, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, do you want a lift? It's raining, we can take you home." And he says, "No, you're right, thanks." And I thought that's just Stan and Jack just playing out a nice moment, and I really appreciate that. And if you were a police officer, I presume, who worked near the Baxter Building, you'd kind of like the Thing, wouldn't you? He'd be that guy. Yeah, he'd be that sort of blue collar guy, So he sort of conveniently sort of wanders into a house, which is owned by a guy. Have you read this issue, Sam?
I hadn't fully read it. I mean, I knew the story before, and then kind of reading up on it today, kind of reminded me of the story, basically.
Okay. Well, it's weird because the guy who is this sort of secret villainous scientist, his head looks a bit like a flesh version of the Thing. It's just bizarre. Even as a kid, I remember reading this. I think I read it in one of those Treasury editions. I think it's where I first read it. And I thought, why does his head look like the Thing? He's even got the sort, where the Thing's got these sort of strange eyebrows, isn't he? Sort of lumpy. Sure. This bloke's head is shaped like that. It's just strange. And so he drugs the Thing, which he put something in his coffee. And I'm thinking, even then I was thinking, how's he going to do that? And the Thing sort of says, I'm going to have a sleep on your couch. And this sort of stranger's couch. And he literally pulls out of a wardrobe one of those sort of Kirby machines, just sort of folds out like a folding bed out this wardrobe. And he sticks this thing on the Thing's head and transfers the Thing's powers to him. And he becomes the Thing, basically. And even though Reed has obviously went to college with Ben, Ben arrives at the Baxter Building and says, "That man's a fake. He's a charlatan. He stole my powers." And and the villain sort of talks Reed into thinking this bloke's just a lookalike, and he's winding him up. And even then, I think that's stretching it a bit, Stan. I'm not sure I'm going with that bit, mate.
Pushing it.
Yeah. But so he's a little bit bereft, because I think back then the thing never really wanted to be the thing. He was all this sort of ugly lump of stone, and he always wanted to go back to human. And sometimes Reed managed it, and sometimes he didn't, and sometimes he changed back. So he sort of while this is going on, he decides, right, I'm going to go around and see Alicia, who, interesting enough, he's just married, isn't he, in the current continuity, I think about a month ago. But whilst that's happening, the imposter is helping Reed do an experiment in the negative zone, and Reed gets sucked in and the rope breaks. So the thing sort of dives in after him, the imposter thing dives in after him. And and you see in this moment, it's a really nice moment where they're stuck on this sort of lump of earth, and it's flying towards the version of the sun in the negative zone. And the thing says, no, you're a good man, I'm going to save you. And he throws Reed back through the portal, and thus, sentencing himself to death, sacrificing himself to this thing. And as this is happening, Ben is about to knock on the door of Alicia's home, and his hand changes back to rock. And Kirby does it so well. You realise that this transformation is happening just through the hand knocking on the door and changing back, and things are kind of back to normal again. And but you feel for both the villain and for the thing in Ben Grimm in this. This is a really interesting story. It's got some real depth now. If they did a one and done like this now, people would be going nuts for it. It's that quality. So it's written by Stan, art by Jack, inks by Joe Sinnott, and letters by Artie Simic. Artie does some great lettering, actually. There's some great sort of title design on it as well, I think, which I presume is Artie, I'm not sure. But yeah, I really liked Jack and Joe. I think they made a great sort of combination in their art and stuff like that. So meaningful be that. I suppose it's another one. I know we mentioned earlier where a lot of the images are properly burned into my mind as remembering them. There's a bit where when Ben is confronting imposter thing, and he says, "You're not the thing, I'm the thing," and he says, "Well, can you do this?" And he sort of crushes this metal tube, and I remember that so well. It's just like so amazing. Yeah. It's like that's kind of me. I'm a big Kirby fan, and I'm a big Stan Lee fan as well. I named my dog after Stan, but I don't think they ever got better together than the Fantastic Four. It really is my favourite of this.
Yeah, that's where it all really started.
Yeah, I think so.
And where it really kind of took off. And why does that particular comic mean something to you?
I don't know. I suppose because it's the combination of something that was meaningful that I kind of read at a young age, but I kind of got in my own sort of young way, and has stayed with me. And I still reread it now. I must have, I don't know, 4 or 5 versions of it in various different formats,
Brilliant.
And I read it, and it's still a great story. It's actually quite a short read. And like the one we had in Scalped, it was one that sort of pressed pause on what was going on in the roller coaster that was the Fantastic Four's life. It sort of inserted itself between stories. And I think that's probably why I think very, very highly of it, is because it's and we're all in it for the nostalgia to a certain extent, aren't we? We all read comics from when we were kids, whether it's Action Force or whether it's the Fantastic Four or whether it's a manga we read as a kid or something like that. But yeah, I think part of that is just remembering that time when I was a kid and reading the Fantastic Four over and over again. I mean, the Treasury edition I've still got from when I was a kid, and it's totally sort of dog-eared and destroyed.
That's great though.
Yeah, that's my one for that one.
Kind of show its age and
exactly.
Yeah, show that it's been used, it's been read.
Yeah.
It hasn't just stayed in its cellophane. It's
I'm a big one for that. I don't believe I'm
as
not
well.
Great...
Or do both. Have one for mucking up and one for staying in its.
I remember a friend of mine came out. I actually just read my comics. There's very few that I back and board, but a friend of mine came around the house and he started a room with it. I bought 2 comics at once, one to read and one to back and board, because that's the sort of presumption people have of us geeks, don't they? They would sort of never take your toys out of the boxes. It's almost like that, isn't it? Yeah. But yeah. No, it's a great comic and worth reading. I was really pleased, actually. We did a Stan Lee episode recently, and we wanted to do something differently. So I gifted Vince and Dan a volume of the Fantastic Four. In fact, it's the volume that leads directly up to this issue, and the boys really enjoyed it. They really did. And I'm glad to see that Stan and Jack stands up so well.
Oh, totally. Always will.
I think so.
Yeah, and so moving on to our next comic. You try to think of the most underrated comic that you've got in your long boxes. Which do you grab?
Yeah. This is another hard one. I wrote your questions down. I keep like a notebook for writing stuff,
Right.
comics and reviews, and I wrote them down. I travelled around with it in my back pocket, and this is the one with the most crossings out. So I crossed out Sergeant Rock, I crossed out Kill Raven, I crossed out Tomb of Dracula, and I thought, no, they're too obvious. Sort of two obvious books that everyone can say, well, everyone talks about those. Maybe they're not so underrated, sort of thing. So I went with something that, excuse me, I went with something that I read more recently, which is The Mermaid Project, which is a book that is published in a number of different formats. I read it digitally, although I do have a physical copy of it now. I read it digitally from Europe Comics, who we're big friends with, and are really sort of forging ahead with putting out the books from Europe that we just don't see, and we should be seeing. And it's just been published. The first volume's just been published physically, so it does count. I can roll it up and put it in my rucksack. By Cinebook. Now, Cinebook's version is slightly smaller. It's smaller than magazine size, and I really wanted something that would show the art of. So, like the total freak that I am, I bought the German version of it on a trip to Berlin recently. So I've got the sort of the big album version of it. It's script and dialogue by Leo and Corinne Jamar. Now, Leo, I don't know if you're aware of his work, but he's currently doing a series called The Survivors. He's an artist as well as a writer normally. And he did Aldebaran and Beetlejuice, and a series of books that just like befuddle you. You get to a certain page, you think, what the F is that he's just drawn? That's the most out of this world creature. Incredible. And he's quite famous for that, and he's quite famous for boobs. They're the two things I think. But yeah. If only we all had that legacy.
That's continental artist for you.
yeah. But he's the writer. So the artwork is by Fred Simon, and the colours are by Jean-Luc Simon. I didn't realise that until I wrote it down, that I suppose they might be brothers or something.
Quite
I don't
possibly.
know. Yeah.
Je ne sais pas.
And sorry, man.
Je ne sais pas, they said.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah. It's I don't know why this isn't on everyone's best of or favourites list for the years it comes out. I really don't know. And I read it digitally there's 5 volumes of it, and I read it digitally in just a couple of weeks. And they're the typical sort of European size. I think they're 48 pages each volume. Just checking. 46 pages per volume. Nice. The first thing that you notice about it is the artwork. It's that sweet spot for me where it's the people have got like a superb grasp of physique and physicality and architecture and animals and vehicles and stuff like that. They know their business, but they also add to it a certain amount of caricature to the facial features, which adds to the acting. Not quite to the extent of it being a sort of manga caricature, but Bond Dessinée gets this right. They've got the grotesque people are more grotesque than you would imagine. Right. The handsome people are often slightly more handsome. This sort of thing.
And slightly exaggerated.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody is.
Yeah. And a panel of this could be an issue for comics. Sometimes there's that much detail in it. I mean, I'm looking at there's a page here with 9 panels in it, and one panel has easily got 20 people drawn in it. Wow. And it's sort of that level. And yeah, it's set in Paris. It's mostly certainly the start of it. The one that I'll be taking with me is set in Paris. And the top of the Eiffel Tower is broken down, but what you get that, and then you realise what you've got is a future-based ecological thriller. And as part of that ecological thriller, you've got the suspicion. I won't ruin anything that happens, but you've got a suspicion there may be human experiments, dolphin experiments, maybe a hybrid. You get sort of killer whales and humpback whales and turtles and everything that goes on under the sea. Is in this book. I actually read this because I really enjoyed Carthago, and I thought this is sort of similar looking. But the world beyond that is much more sort of richly conceived than even that suggests. And what the writers in the Ice have done is they've reversed social norms. So the underclass of whites in Paris and the middle class and upper class of black people, and the girl who is our heroine in it. for more reasons than you initially realise, is a white girl who joins the Parisian police department and is seen as a bit of a nothing, a bit of a silly girl, silly white girl who's joined, trying to play up, and they reverse that, and they reverse a lot of the hierarchy of the country, and they also reverse a lot of the hierarchy of countries in the world. So, for example, Brazil is probably richer than, say, France, or some countries are doing better than others, and France is a real sort of, has almost become a sort of second world, sort of power sort of thing,
Right.
Really, really clever. It is absolutely enthralling and beautiful to look at. I was just entranced by it totally. Like I say, I bought it on digital. I'd highly recommend you go to the end of it. There's so many twists and turns that I can only think they must have known what happened halfway through volume 5 before they even started volume 1. It's that sort of clever, cunning planning to it, So that's it.
And the title, is that kind of to do with the experiments that they're doing?
Yeah. So that kind of gives it away a little bit. You kind of know where they're going. There's more to her than you realise, and her brother works for this sort of big company that's experimenting on these human dolphin hybrids. And there's a couple of moments you go,
the Mermaid Project.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And at one point you go, oh right, fuck me, here we go. Right, I get this. It's a bit like that.
Right,
it's quite violent.
Connect
it's quite
the
sexual.
dots.
Yeah,
Right.
it's quite violent and sexual. So it's not an all ages choice by any stretch.
No,
I just wish we did these sort of big versions of it. I've like the freak that I am, I double dip on some things just to get the artwork sometimes, because the digital's nice, but you can't sort of stick it on a shelf and hold it up and look at the whole page, which is bigger than your iPad or tablet page or whatever it is, So
Exactly.
so I did that. That would be underrated. I recommend people find that, and you'll fall down the rabbit hole of Europe comics and humanoids and all these sort of people as well. I think
I
if you
really
do
need
that.
to get into that, because I've heard you guys obviously speak about Europe comics, and I'm gonna have to definitely dive into all of that. They do have some really interesting titles.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I think people are beginning to get it. I think we're at the tipping point now where it's almost like a fight to get the next big thing. I know there's a new Jodorowsky book's just come out. Trying to think, I think it's an El Topo. It's a companion to the El Topo movie, and Jodorowsky's just put it out, and it's been bought out by Archaea. And as I understand it, I think I was reading something online from Tim Pilcher, who used to represent humanoids in this country, and he was saying that humanoids couldn't afford it, and Archaea, there was a bit of a bidding war.
Right.
So I think rather than sort of discovering books and putting them out, I think we're getting to the point now where people are sort of going to have a little fight over who can put what out. It's interesting times. Yeah,
it is interesting times, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Yeah,
a couple of interesting years ahead for sure. And so we're almost towards the end of the list. Yeah, it has. And you think, okay, so you're thumbing through all of your comics. Now I need to find the best comic of all time. What do you?
Yeah, I know what you said. I know Milmo kicked off a bit about this, saying
objectively. I've changed the question a little bit to, for you, what's the best comic of all time?
I get you. It's hard, isn't it? It's like
it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough, and I went backwards and forwards on this, and like I said, I went with I tried going with Cerebus for a while, and so that's an awful lot to talk about, and some of it's quite dull, and probably people will probably kick off about some of Dave Sims' opinions, and I went back to the comic that I probably most reread over the years, and one that probably had the most effect on me growing up. So there's this whole theory, isn't there, about what you read and what you like when you're 12 or 13 sticks with you for the rest of your life.
Right.
Have you heard this theory?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's kind of those movies that we saw when we were that age, and the books that we start reading adult books maybe around that time.
Sure.
And for me, it was the sweet spot for me at the time was Claremont and Burns' X-Men, Uncanny X-Men. And I know I sent you Dark Phoenix Saga as the book that I would most grab, but I decided to pick out a single issue, which would be, pardon me, issue 133, which is Wolverine Lashes Out, which is Wolverine, everyone thinks, oh, Wolverine's his character. He's everywhere. He's got about 5 monthly issues. He's in about 5 comics a month. Back then, he was just in the X-Men, and he was kind of a bit of a side character. And he was a bit of an afterthought from, like we talked about earlier, that he'd come from a Hulk comic. And everyone went, oh, yeah, I remember about him. Why don't we bring him back? And we weren't really even that sure of him for a while. I remember reading it thinking, well, we haven't really seen his head. I wonder if his head is the shape of those weird sort of things on his mask and stuff like that,
Exactly.
Yeah. Or did the claws come out of his gloves, or what is he?
How
just
does
like
that work? Do they come out of his forearms, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we didn't really know, did we? We didn't have a clue. And this is kind of one of the issues where he takes centre stage. I think he had been. There's obviously there's a bit going on before when he was in the sewers and stuff like that. And he's done a couple of things, the Magneto issues, for example. But this is one. It opens with him. It's called Wolverine Lashes Out on the cover, but it's actually called Wolverine Alone when you go into the actual issue. It's written by Chris Claremont and John Byrne. They co-plotted it. I noticed that they've started saying it in this now. And John Byrne penciled it, and Terry Austin inked it. And I have to say that I've always thought that Byrne's best when he's been inked by Austin. I know Gareth Hopkins will probably disagree with me because I know he does the Alpha podcast, but Alpha Flight one. But I really like it's a denser image, I think, sometimes. As much as I love Byrne, I love stuff Byrne does now, apart from those weird Star Trek photo stories he does. But it's lettered by Ton Orzechowski, and Glynis Wein, who was Len Wein's wife, is the colorist on it, and edited by Jim Salicrup. Little tip: if you're friends of Jim Salicrup on Facebook, he sends you a birthday message every year, which really cheers me up. I think, oh my God, it's got a birthday message from the bloke who edited one of my favourite ever comics. He's like the sweetest guy.
Smokes.
Yeah,
that's a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, I know. It must be, wasn't it? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There you go.
Cool
I send him one back, so he's a lucky man. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Nice to be nice.
Yeah. So the Hellfire Club have kidnapped a bunch of the X-Men, including Jean Grey, who's kind of gone a bit crazy. The Phoenix is kind of surfacing.
She went a bit crazy, just a bit.
Yeah, just destroyed a couple of worlds, sort of thing. And
she lost her temper a little bit.
Yeah, and got sort of quite saucier due to it. But there you go. I know if I ever lose my mind, I might start wearing basques suddenly, but let's hope not. And
I'd
so
like
Wolverine.
To see that.
Yeah, I know you would. Yeah.
Maybe you could do the cosplay competition. At
You know how much I love cosplayers. I love them. I'll get them proper side. This is like the Awesome Pod now. It's towards the end, it just goes badly, doesn't it? It just goes off the rails. So he goes through the sewers, comes into the club, and I remember reading this as a kid, and he properly guts people. He just goes for them. Brilliant. And he's kind of letting go. And I remember he gets shot, and I remember even as a kid reading it thinking, because we didn't really know that he could survive bullets back then. And he gets shot, and then he comes to, and then at one point, I really loved this scene. I absolutely loved it, where there's a sort of one of these sort of weird masked soldiers, and he's the last one. You can see he's a bit nervous, so he puts his claws away, and he says, "Try it," and the bloke just bottles it. But nice. Of course, he stabs him anyway, which I thought was quite cool.
Yeah,
there you go. And at that point, we realised, at that point we realised who Wolverine was, and there's actually it's actually paced really well. This comic, you get bits of it that you think, it runs from sequences. It doesn't overcomplicate itself. I mean, I've been reading the X-Men since I was a kid, and I've bought them and read them non-stop, and I think Uncanny X-Men has started again recently. I think we're up to about issue 10 or 12 now. But it just overcomplicates. I think the mistake that people make when they write an X-Men comic is they think they've got to be sort of super complicated all of a sudden, and they don't. And this has got Wolverine basically on his own. Then it's got the captors talking, and the fact that Jean Grey is sort of hypnotised. Then we get a little. He's quite famous for having A, B, and C stories. Claremont. He would run a little sort of indent of another story, and then we get a few sort of bits of them, and then we're back to Wolverine again, and he's back to trying to save them, and it ends on another brilliant cliffhanger, which is Cyclops is dead. And the next issue is Too Late, the Heroes, which goes into another sort of the Hellfire Club versus the X-Men issue, which is a real sort of standout as well. But yeah, it's just so action packed. Again, every panel is so well done. There's a great. I'm just looking at it now. There's a great shot that I remember from when I was a kid, where one of the soldiers holds a gun to Wolverine's head, and he just grabs his wrist and throws him. You know, it's like that sort of
Rad.
pragmatic, sudden violence that people don't expect. You know, because he is this brawler and he's not this sort of gentleman. And you know, I always thought that was when. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the mistake. I love the X-Men movies, and I love Logan, and I love the Wolverine movies and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of when I was reading the X-Men back then. I thought Jean, because he always loved Jean Grey, didn't he, Logan? He always had a thing for her, and I thought he stands no chance because he's about 5 foot tall. He's slightly hirsute like me, and he's sort of there's no chance anything's going to happen. But when the movies came out, you thought, well, he's actually an option, isn't he, Hugh Jackman? He's not a bad looking fella, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I can see it going that way. Yeah,
totally.
50-50. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But back then, he was a real outsider, a real sort of people that a brooder. No one really understood him, and he was always someone they were a little bit scared of as well. This is a comic that I've probably bought it 6 times. I have to say. Brilliant. I've got a couple of versions of the American comic. I've got it in. I think it was in Rampage or something like that became the X-Men Monthly comic in the UK. Right. I've got the Essential. I've got the Omnibus. I've got the digital. You name it, I've got it because it's a real standout, and I don't think they've ever bettered it. I think they've tried to return to it, and I think they keep trying to return to the sort of Dark Phoenix thing. I know they are again in the movie, aren't they? Soon, and I don't think they've. Yeah.
That's going to disappear as soon as Disney have finally got back all the X-Men characters from Fox. But
yeah, you're right. So now I watched just before I came on to you, I watched the Titans TV series. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but I've heard good things. I've heard it's actually good.
God, it's hardcore.
Is it?
Yeah, I texted a couple of mates saying this is nuts, but good nuts. It's like
I have to check it out.
Super violent as well.
Yeah.
It's not George Perez's Teen Titans, but
it's not Arrow.
No, yeah. It's not, which is even worse. It's not Legends of Tomorrow.
Oh right.
Oh my God, I just watched that because it's so bad. Have you seen the one where John Constantine goes back to punk London?
No, I haven't. I bet it's terrible. Like somebody's Googled some images for some bars in London and tried to make it in LA. And
exactly what it is. And part of it is clearly just shot in a Vancouver park.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Classic.
And they all drive. All the cars have got the steering wheels on the wrong side. They drive on the wrong side of the road. A couple of people are Scottish. It's that sort of classic shit version of London. Yeah. You expect Vinnie Jones to turn up and shout that he supports Manchester United or something. It's like that.
So lame. Rubbish. That is definitely one of the best comics of all time.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's a pretty good choice, mate.
Yeah, Byrne's great. I mean, I had a rather unfortunate incident where I met Claremont as a 14-year-old, and he broke this poor comic fan's heart, and I kind of always feel a bit bad about looking at it because I think I'm at the point now where I can distance the creative from the creation. I think some of the art from the art, the artist from the art sometimes, because he is a proper bellend, Claremont. I don't know if you've ever met him, but he actually sort of has got this sort of fake English accent he puts on. Yeah, and he's got a head that looks like a walnut. But other than that, it is still pretty amazing.
Incredible. So moving on to almost our final question.
Oh, okay.
So we're now at your farm.
Okay.
And you've got all of your comics, but it's a really cold winter. And unfortunately, there is no wood available, and you have to burn all of your comics but one. Which one do you keep?
Oh Christ! Come on, just cut a hand off and burn my teeth or something
instead.
I think I'd have to keep the X-Men. I think I'd have to keep that one. Yeah, it would be the one that I would go back to the most. Yeah, definitely. I think it would be that. Yeah. It was going to be the thing. This man is sponsored, but I think the X-Men would be the one. It's a richer read. There's more to it. Yeah, I think so. I could amuse myself by copying some of the panels because I like Byrne's artwork and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, I think I'd do that one. Yeah.
Keep with that. That's a good choice.
What about you? Out of those ones I've talked about,
what would you choose? Yeah. I would choose X-Men Dark Phoenix Saga.
Okay. Yeah, you're an X-Men fan, or?
Yeah, I am. I'll tell you what. So I don't know if I ever told you so. I mean, I read the Beano and stuff like that when I was a kid and everything, but I only really got into comics like probably about 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so I'm a late bloomer in terms of all this. So I'm just starting to catch up with all of this stuff. Yeah, I'm allowed. I don't have to kind of have decades of reading comics beforehand. It's amazing to kind of read these massive storylines that are such a large part of like a lot of pop culture today.
Yeah. I think it's a book you can really pick. That Dark Phoenix saga, it still stands up now. I think anyone who's just getting into comics or something, I'd highly recommend that as a one. You can probably find it quite cheaply somewhere either, I think. It does stand up, and it's there's none of this sort of overcomplication. You got to know about Marrow or Legion or something like this, to be able to enjoy the Uncanny X-Men, which I had high hopes for. But this is the old stuff. Some old, but the old stuff is good like that, because to keep up with the X-Men, you just had to read the X-Men. To keep up with the Avengers, you just had to read the Avengers. It was a bit like that back then,
Right.
No crossovers.
Yeah, rather than crossing over here, there, and everywhere. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So you're in your farm. You've got your copy of X-Men Dark Phoenix Saga, and you've got a weapon, tool, or useful item that you take into this apocalypse. What would it be?
Okay. Yeah, this is a hard one, isn't it?
It is.
Because obviously there would be no law, so I would quite enjoy killing people who liked Aquaman. So I would want some kind of weapon
from kind of credit card receipts.
And as a vegetarian, I would have to wonder whether I would revert, because I'm a lifelong veggie, whether I would revert to eating meat as an only way of getting certain nutrients, or maybe in the winter surviving. Right. So I went through a number of them. I went through like a gun, and I thought, well, guns are too noisy. That would draw people over who I didn't want to speak to. A gun with a silencer, the bullets would run out. Then obviously the go-to that everyone will say, I'm sure, is a samurai sword. But a samurai sword is you can't chase a cow and hit it, or chase a deer or something, hit it with a samurai sword. It ain't going to work. As much as I'd love a samurai sword just to sort of slice people up. So I eventually went for one of those compound bows with like a lifetime supply of arrows. I think that's where I've gone with it. Yeah, because it's difficult to fucking make arrows. Yeah, and I did a bit of archery over the years, and I think I could probably work it out. And those compound bows are pretty good, and also silent. So I think I'd probably go for that. I think. Nice. Yeah.
Compound bow and a lifetime supply of arrows. I'm sure we can supply with that. And do you want to know what Dan chose?
Yeah, go on. Yeah. What did he choose?
He chose I'll give you the specific thing that he chose. So it's not just a crowbar. It's a roughneck heavy-duty guerrilla wrecking bar of 48 inches. Is what he chose.
I'm worried about him. He's clear. He is a serial killer, isn't he? I don't think there's any doubt. We all know that he's a serial killer. Yeah.
Quite possibly. So you guys would be an interesting duo with your bow and arrow and his crowbar.
We could be like warring cities, couldn't we? Vince could have another city somewhere else.
Yeah,
and we could just be at war with each other.
Crowbar gang versus bow and arrow gang. That'd be hilarious.
And you haven't had Vince on yet, have you? So Vince, hopefully,
not
you'll
yet.
get Vince
I'm
on
waiting
at some point.
For him. Yeah. I'm trying to get him. So
good.
Fingers crossed, he'll be on. That'd be fantastic. And then we could put you all in a Thunderdome with your weapons.
That'd be brilliant.
And then see how that goes down.
Yeah, just rip the piss out of each other till one of us won.
Bingo.
He is pretty remorseless. We will have just come back. By the time you hear this, we would have just come back from True Believers, where we will have. My jaw would have been hurting from laughing, but it would have been like no holds bar, piss taking of each other constantly. I do have a plan to, if anyone has seen me, I did have a plan to go to my table in my night shorts. So
I
we'll
did
see
hear
what
about
happens.
these night shots on this week's episode. It's so funny.
I've got a pair of those sort of Elvis sunglasses, like
As
the sort
well.
of and I was thinking of just going full on Lebowski and
Just
just
do
going
it,
down
man. The dude.
to go to
Go for
breakfast
it,
dressed like that. There's Dylan Teague eating his cornflakes and me wandering around drinking from a bottle of Jack Daniels or something. Yeah.
That'd be ace, mate. That'd be funny. That could be your cosplay. Just the dude.
Yes, finally they got me in cosplay. Yeah.
Bingo. There you go.
Yeah. I think it's sort of more of a sort of slightly crossed with the in-betweeners kind of, thing going on. That's kind of our demographic, isn't it? Let's face it.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%, mate. Fantastic. Well, Tony, thank you
Mate,
so
that's great,
much.
and I hope you do your own one because I want to hear what you think. You must be sitting there biting your tongue, waiting to think, "Oh, what am I going to say?" Yeah,
yeah, definitely. But no, I'll do it one day.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, that'd be fun.
You are making yourself the Roy Plumley of podcasting, which I kind of think is a good place to be.
It's a good one. Good.
Yeah.
As long as that's a compliment.
It is. No, it is. The Plumley. He's the god of Desert Island Discs, isn't he? He did it for decades. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. And he's a good interview as well. He's one of those slightly posh BBC guys, but he asks some pretty probing questions. They're the likes of Alec Guinness or all these sort of people on there. They're really interesting things. If you can find the Alec Guinness
back through the archive.
Alec Guinness does one. I think he's filming Star Wars at the time, and he says things like, "I'm off filming this sci-fi movie." He does a bit of that. It's quite funny. Yeah, it's quite cool.
That.
Yeah,
It's so cool. I love finding out about stuff like that. It's really good. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much for being.
No, pleasure, mate. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Show. It's a lot of fun, and I mean, I'm just blown away by your infinite knowledge of comics.
It's a misspent youth, my friend. That is. Yeah, I could have learned how to, like, I don't know, fix broken bones or something like that, or mend a car. But instead, I just know who was in the X-Men in 1982. It's like a waste of a life, isn't it? But there you go. It's not bad.
At all. It's fantastic, and it's incredible, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing you at True Believers. But as you said
we'll have
before,
a laugh,
this will air afterwards. But for the listeners at home, where can they find you again?
Yeah, so you go to neverendanything.blogspot.co.uk. That's where I tend to put all the sort of insulting stuff that we put out. If you want a copy of the Awesome Comics Anthology, go to awesomecomicpod.bigcartel.com. And if you go to SASEZOHYZ is where you can follow me on Twitter. There you go.
Fantastic. And then be sure to Google or search in iTunes for Awesome Comics Podcast if you don't listen to it already.
Thank you, man.
It's a great listen. And
I must get you on soon, actually. We'll do a little interview at True Believers, shall we? So we might you might be on. We might both be on great. 2 podcasts today.
At the same time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. We're gonna rip a tear in reality.
Next thing, world domination, Rodney.
There we go. It's time next year. Totally, mate. Fantastic, Tony. Well, thanks again. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Although when this airs, we would have seen each other. Crazy.
Yeah, it's weird like that, isn't it? Yeah. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Take care,
See
mate.
you soon. Take care.
Bye. Thanks again to Tony for being on Comics for the Apocalypse. It was an absolute riot to have you on, mate. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review for us on iTunes or whichever podcast service you use, as not only will it let me know that you liked it, but I believe it helps make other people aware of the show as well. If you'd like to check out Tony's work or follow him on social media, those links are in the show notes, along with all of our own links to the various areas of the internet. And finally, as long as the apocalypse doesn't come to pass in the next week, I'll see you next Monday. Bye for now.